There are some interesting numbers from today's crash. It was about 23 hours ago. We have this initial little divot where there's a peak, and that's the cliff. It's not the peak, it's the cliff right before the price bottoms out, and then we've got the valley, and then we've got this sauntering, meandering return upwards. So a slight upwards trend, at least for Bitcoin. And so now that you know the numbers we're looking at, from Bitcoin's cliff to the valley, there was a loss of 13.7%. What's interesting is Bitcoin has recovered the poorest of any of the cryptocurrencies that I took a look at it. And there's 15 different cryptos in this bag. So Bitcoin's recovery has curiously been very low. And it hasn't reached double digits, unlike any of the other cryptos. And so the difference between the cliff and the recovery number, and the recovery number is from just about 45 minutes before I recorded this video. The difference is 5.5%. So Bitcoin is still down negative 5.5% from its original cliff to the recovery. So looking at ETH has actually done well. ETH only lost 11% on the crash, and it has fully recovered. It recovered 14.5% from its bottom number, which was 3,632. And currently, the difference between the cliff and the recovery price is plus 1.9% for ETH. Now, remember, this cliff, the price action was trending downwards to get to the cliff, and then the bottom fell out. So remember that there was actually a slight drop even before we got to the cliff. With Solana, same story as ETH, minus 11% on the crash, but it's recovered nicely, only down 2%. Luna is actually it's performing amazing. Not only did it recover, it actually gained 22.5% from the cliff price to the current price. Polygon down, it lost 18.6% on the crash. Litecoin was one of the higher drops at 24%, and it's still not recovered. It's still down 10% from its original cliff price. Sandbox, looking at Sandbox, it dropped 19.7%, but is all the way recovered, and it's actually up 4% over its original cliff price. Zcash had one of the biggest drops at 23%, and it is still down 5%. And I actually thought that this would happen with Zcash because a lot of the money in Zcash was new money. It wasn't money that had been that had been there a while, because we had seen a recent rise up. So even at 195, there was still a lot of new money in here. The Valley was actually all the way down to 150, great price, but we've seen a nice recovery for Zcash. Moon River down 16.5%, only down 4.1% from its cliff. Digibyte lost the most, 30.5%. And I know this isn't a well-known coin, but it is one I'm looking at, and so I was interested. But it recovered nicely. It's only down 8% from its cliff price now. So that's that's interesting, right? Like to see it drop so far, but then to have such a good recovery. And by the way, the recovery is the amount of from the valley to the actual recovery number that's currently that currently exists. So the valley is going to be that's the valley. So continuing on, we've got Polkadot minus 20% on the crash, still down a fairly good amount. Let's see, still down 10% or 9% from its cliff price. Basic attention token, I just threw this in here because it's different and I've been looking at it. It went down 20%, but it's only down 4% from that cliff. Binance held very steady. So if you're looking for something that's more solid, something more resistant to crashes, Binance. And what we're seeing is a trend. If there's some real world utility, there's not the crash isn't as severe for some of these coins that are in high usage right now. So Binance stayed fairly strong, and it's now only down 0.6% from its cliff price. Crypto.com lost 16.5%, has actually gone above its cliff price. And then XRP had a major drop, 26.9%. It's It's still down 6.2%, but it's had a recovery of 28.4. So some takeaways from today's crash. Look for the extreme losses, because I think one of the assumptions, at least for me, is that I just there's a big crash across the board, and you lump all crypto and just they're all down. But if you're not paying attention, you don't realize that there's a lot of variance in these numbers, which means there's a chance, there's opportunity to go ahead and cash in on some of these numbers. Also, setting limit buys is a really good idea, and especially because we know about where the max is that we're going to have a loss in a day. So set your limit buys, but differentiate the limit buys. Don't just set it as 1%. Obviously, different crypto are going to fall different amounts. We see more solid ones, more stable ones with utility like Solana, ETH, something that's hot like Luna. Those aren't going to fall as much. Binance didn't fall as much. And this isn't to take these numbers and apply them across the board. Different crashes are going to be different, and especially considering the different market dynamics at the time. But this is the latest data, and so it is helpful going forward. If you're going to put in limit buys, what should I be looking at? Because you can't be at your computer at all time. This actually happened just before, I think, midnight Central Time in the US. So, you're not always paying attention to crypto. You don't know when everything falls. I actually don't want alerts hitting my phone, but maybe I should if they're going to drop this far. But you can set limit buys, and knowing what these percentages are, you can have a good idea of if there is a crash, about when is a good time to buy in. Because if we go back and we look at this, valley, you only had a moment to catch that before it had already recovered to some degree. So that's important to keep in mind. Like, if you have a limit buy set, you can catch it. You can come in here and catch some nice percentages. But when you wake up in the morning, you're not going to have that. You're not going to get that same amount. So you've really got to. It's a momentary opportunity. And again, the ROI is going to vary widely depending on the coin. And as I talked about, some crypto are more crash resistant than others. But this has been a very interesting crash. I did think it was going to happen. I think this, this to me is the mini crash that's setting up for the big one. The big one, I'm guessing it comes in 2022. That's my timeline. I think we're looking at February or March for the big one. And when that one comes in, that's going to be completely different. But in between now and then, especially with these intraday losses, right? You're not going to see the crypto market collapse all of a sudden, I don't think. I think you're going to see it go down, and then again, it's going to cascade down again. So when you're setting buy limits, that can be for that day, and then you just have to keep in mind, okay, what does tomorrow bring? But there's usually after there's a significant dip, or I think this counts as a crash. When that happens, there's typically a bounce back, right? Even if it goes down again, the original response is typically a bounce back. So there is a chance to make some money. And I did personally I got on Zcash and Bitcoin. I just wanted to stay conservative. And I bought some Polygon, just a little bit of Polygon. I think like $800 of Polygon. So I've recovered a little bit, but I could have recovered a lot more if I had a limit buy-in on some of these, and was able to cash in on some of that valley. That valley was just there for a moment, and then it came back up. So good takeaways, good general principles from today's crash.